A very good morning to Ms. Lulu. My name is Janice Chupei, and today I'm going to present my assignment report, Syntactic Manipulation in Headlines, Impact, Engagement, and Ethics. So, for introduction, language has extraordinary power to shape the way in which readers understand and respond to information, as is evident in headlines of media organizations. Headlines are typically a reader's first exposure to news content, and their syntax can affect emotional and cognitive processing. The word arrangement, certain omissions, and grammar patterns are deliberate tactics used to shape audience judgments on the relevance, tone, and credibility of this message. This is referred to syntactic manipulations, the conscious manipulations of sentence form to focus attention, win over readers, or affect interpretation. Mm, 10 syntactically manipulated headlines that I chose is from Malaysian sources, and the data was collected in July 2025 to September 2025, which is the period time of 3 months. And the material chosen ranges from newspaper, advertising, and government notice. News were extracted from newspaper as well as online paper, The Star, New Straits Times, and Malay Mail, while promotional content from billboards, flyers, and social media ads of Malaysian retailers. So moving on to here is my 10 syntactically manipulated headlines that I've chose. You can see here. The first one is PM vows to rebuild stronger nation after floods. And the second one is no time to waste, act now to save our forests. And the third one, your dream home awaits buy now, pay later. The fourth one, full up your day with freshness and flavor. And the fifth one, exams postponed, student advised to check new schedule. So these are the overall headlines that I've chose from for 10 topics, 10 headlines. And moving on to theoretical foundation. So for syntactic concepts relevant to the analysis, the synthetic manipulation of media headlines for meaning, emphasis, and emotional impact constitutes one of the main topics in this research. The word order, ellipsis, fronting, nominalization, and imperative forms are considered. This framework shaped readers' sense of urgency, authority, and objectivity. For instance, the headline, No Time to Waste, Act Now to Save Our Forest, talks of urgency and a chorus of act, but not too far about ellipses, exams postponed, students advised to check new schedule which condensed what may be a longer sentence. So for the critical overview of two grammar theories for generative grammar and systemic functional grammar, generative grammar is introduction by Noam Chomsky in the 1950s, which hypothesized that innate grammatical rules within the human mind constrain language, revolutionized the academic disciplines of linguistics. While the systemic functional grammar is introduced by M.K. Halliday in the 1960s, it regards language as a tool for the construction of meaning in context, a social semiotic. So for the key principles for generative grammar, it makes a difference between surface structure or form and deep structure meaning. The deep structures can be mapped onto many different surface forms through transformational rules. This theory accounts for different grammatical patterns such as active and passive speech, which is police arrest suspect, and suspect is arrested by police, could express similar concepts. So for the systemic functional grammar, there are three metafunctions that are focused. And the first one, conceptual, which is expressing experience, and the second one, interpersonal, which is communicating sentiments and connections, and the third one, which is textual, um, organizing information. Generative grammar relevance to headline is such changes such as preservation, question formation, and deletion generate different vertical or emotional effects in headline, can have fine-grained classification or clarification, is through the use of generative grammar. And it has been claimed by systemic functional grammar that the main case of headline strategies to express effective positioning is emotional connection with readers. An example of an interpersonal relationship venturism is in applying the overcoming mode, act now to save life. So this is the comparative discussion with other two theories. So primarily, the present study is based on generative grammar and systemic functional grammar to examine the transformation in syntactic manipulation of media headlines. The two theories provide alternative viewpoints and not mutually exclusive ones that on how syntax operates. Systemic functional grammar is concerned with the communicative roles of sentence. Generative grammar is concerned with their underlying structure. A host of distinctions and convergence exist between their approaches to syntax, meaning and the use of language when compared to other linguistic theories like construction grammar and cognitive grammar. So for cognitive grammar that is introduced by Langecker in 1987, considers that syntax is meaning bearing and symbolic of human conceptualization, as opposed to generative grammar that sees syntax as an autonomous system governed by universal rules. Second, for the construction grammar, which is by Goldberg, argues that all grammatical patterns are learned from form meaning pairings or constructions rather than systemic functional grammar's view of language as a social semiotic system yeah, which relies relational, interpersonal, and textual meanings. So for this, generally cognitive grammar and construction grammar broaden the knowledge of syntax as a mirror of cognition and common usage, whereas generative grammar and systemic functional grammar explain syntax through and communicative purpose. When taken as whole, this similarity shows that syntactic manipulation in headlines is a complicated interaction involving mental representation, communication aim, and social context rather than just grammatical innovation. So moving on to the structural analysis. So for structural analysis, I will just put two of the 2 out of 10 headlines. And the first one is PM vows to rebuild stronger nation after floods. So these headlines can be seen as a shorter version of the complete sentence. The Prime Minister vows that he will rebuild a stronger nation after floods, according to generative grammar. Okay, well now here is the tree diagram for headline one. So here's the subject, noun phrases, and noun to become PM, verb phrases, infinitive verb, noun phrases, adjective noun, proportional phrases. So, and here's the second headline. From crisis to courage, Malaysia stands united. This headline fronted prepositional phrases from crisis to courage and independent clause, such as Malaysia stands united, constitute complex clause in generative grammar. This is the process of moving a prepositional phrase to the beginning of the sentence for emphasis and using it as an adjunct to convey a function or event. So this single headline reveals several levels of meaning through the use of systemic functional grammar. According to the ideational metafunction, militia is identified as the actor, stands together as a relational process, expressing status or situations, and transitions from crisis to bravery. Through the declarative framework, the interpersonal metafunction engages readers emotionally by expressing unity and optimism. Militia stands united as the rim, conveying the main message of national unity, while crisis to courage serves as the theme, highlighting the transition from hardship to strength. Therefore, systemic functional grammar describes how that rearrangement changes communicative aim and emotional resonance, whereas generative grammar captures the syntactic rearrangement that results in emphasis. So here is the tree diagram for headline 2. Moving on to the comparative evaluation. While we recognize the systemic, functional grammar, and generative grammar have been immense help in our comparative analysis of headlines, which are otherwise not possible, they, however, function from a distinct persuasive angle in the features comprising media headlines on one hand. In generative syntax, which is a formal system utilizing transformational rules and hierarchical phrase structures to distinguish grammatical sentence from ungrammatical ones. This model is helpful in explaining how some modifications such as ellipsis, exams postponed, students advised to check new schedule or preservation, flood victims rescue, originate from underlying structures. Its clarity and structural precision makes it fabulous for discovering the grammatical operations at work in compact and effective headlines. Um, Moving on to the personal insight. So this study has increased my awareness on how syntax slightly influences perception as a media consumer. I frequently read headlines specifically before doing this study, concentrating mostly on the text. For instance, the clarity of no time to waste, act now to save our forests immediately communicates urgency, while the inclusive structure of Together We Rise supporting flood victims nationwide generates sympathy and solidarity. My interaction with the media has changed as a result of this insight. I now read headlines objectively, noticing who is highlighted, who is left out, and what feelings the arrangement evokes. Additionally, I've come to understand how syntactic manipulation and brevity increase clicks or emotional impact for commercial gain. My media literacy has improved as a result. I can now identify manipulation using both syntax and vocabulary. This introspective analysis emphasizes how crucial synthetic awareness is to consuming news in an ethical manner. Moving on to the conclusion and recommendation. In conclusion, the analysis of syntactic manipulation in media headlines demonstrate the influence of language on interpretation, emotion, and ethical perception beyond basic phrase structure. It is evident from the frameworks of generative grammar and systemic functional grammar that syntax is served by both a structural and communicative device. Generative grammar finds out the formal mechanisms that produce catchy, succinct headlines such as transformations, ellipses, and passive, but systemic functional grammar shows us how these same structures both do social and ideological work for grounding some participants in having agency. Thus, we can understand that headlines are not neutral forms of language. Instead, they are tools strategized to provoke a response in readers, frame plots, and influence the reader's emotional and cognitive involvement with text. Understanding this on both levels deepens critique on syntax within broader cultural and ethical contexts as well as appreciation for media language complexities. Moving on to part, these findings enables us to make a number of suggestions for the media professionals, educators, and readers. Always bring out a bit of grammar of to your reading of headlines. Then you will find that simple flow and structure can subtly veer the emotion directions. Educators should incorporate syntactical analysis into media literacy studies, allowing students to see that grammar isn't just form but also meaning, persuasion, and ideology. With this strategy, both ethical and critical thinking are nurtured and a linguistic base laid. For its part, media creators should take advantage of proper linguistic manipulation to attract readers yet without distorting facts or playing to prejudice. Finally, to see a syntax as a system, structure, and communication also empowers all users of language with intelligence, integrity, and realism to avoid making media blunders. So for this reflective component, as a result of this research, we have a better understanding of how language serves as a structural and persuasive tool in media discourse. Initially, when I began the research, my conception of syntax was as a system of grammatical rules that dictates how sentences are built. But when I analyzed actual headlines in the real world, I found that language patterns have convert meanings that get under the reader's skin and guide his emotion and attitudes and thoughts. I realized that decisions about, say, confronting um, the emotional subject matter or exercising agents or employing the passive voice are conscious political choices that operate on more obvious levels than simply a questions of grammar. That discovery changed the way I thought about grammar. No more was purely technical, but a means to communicate and manipulate. Learning systemic functional grammar and generative grammar both contributed to increasing my theoretical knowledge of language system and analyzing skills. I learned to analyze the structure of phrases and transformation under generative grammar, which enhanced my accuracy for probing syntactic dependencies. Systemic functional grammar, on the other hand, taught me how to approach syntax with social and ethical in mind, thinking about how grammar inflects roles, power, and point out of view in text. This double-head perspective has made me more aware of the ethical questions raised by language use, especially in media where language is used to shape public opinion. On the personal side, this study has made me into a media consumer who is more knowledgeable and responsible than those before. For one thing, I now read headlines more carefully and conscious of how the construction of a sentence can alter its meaning and intent. It is worth only when you have this insight that one relationship will avoid becoming one-sided. Otherwise, daily encounters with news, social media, and the all of a sudden seem incomprehensible, interpreted strictly superficially. This entire project improved not just my academic knowledge and language level, but also provided the techniques of critical thinking, ethical interpretation value as well. It supplied me with communication skills that will be used for life. So these are the screenshot that I use to detect the AI for introduction, theoretical foundation, um, structural analysis, personal insight, conclusion. Mm. So that's all from me.